Music, the art of sound. Music has been enjoyed since the beginning of time and has evolved into what you and I hear today. But none of you are here to hear me talk about how fantastic music is. This is a physics video after all. Today we will look at how we hear music and the generation of tone, going deeper into the world of sound than you have likely ever pondered. Hopefully, you do not find that it hurts.
Aw, boo.
Hey!
First, let's talk about what sound is. While we often visualize sound as a sine wave, in the physical world it is actually a compression wave, as can be seen in a spring like this one. When an object makes a sound, it sends a vibration through the air particles immediately surrounding it. Those particles transfer their energy into other particles until it reaches our ears, where our brain converts those tiny vibrations into our perception of sound. We think of the speed of sound as a universal constant similar to the speed of light, but in reality it is actually dependent on the medium the sound is traveling through. In room temperature air around sea level, that speed is about 346 meters per second. While this is fast, it is still slow enough to produce a noticeable delay between seeing something and hearing it at great distances. Any sound can be measured along two main aspects: volume and pitch. The pitch is determined by the frequency of the wave, or how fast it completes one cycle. The volume is determined by the amplitude of the wave. In a longitudinal wave, it is measured by how dense the compressions of the wave are. This means that there is actually an upper limit on how loud a sound can be. In air, that limit is around 194 decibels. Past that point, the space between the compression waves becomes completely devoid of air. Instead of moving through air, the sound is moving a pressurized wall of air through the space.
So, let's get into the discussion of tuning. The pitch of a note is defined by its specific frequency in hertz. Hertz is simply a measure of the number of cycles per second. The faster the cycles, the higher the pitch we perceive. But of course, when we're playing music, we don't see it in terms of hertz. We see it as collections of notes. So, how do we get those notes? All notes are fundamentally derived from the ratios between their frequencies. The perfect octave, the most stable interval, is found by multiplying a root frequency by a power of 2. Here's A440. A880. And A220. The next most stable interval is the perfect fifth, found by multiplying the root by a ratio of 3/2. But the scale traditionally used in Western music has 12 notes. So, how do we get there? Well, there are a few different ways.
The first method of tuning is just intonation. This means that all notes in the scale are derived from low integer ratios of the root note. While it may seem like the best way to stay in tune, it has a few major flaws. Firstly, one of the fifths is slightly bigger than the 3/2 ratio, meaning it is out of tune. Secondly, the ratios for accidentals, or notes outside of the key, are not in tune. Because all the ratios are derived from a single root, this makes key changes nearly impossible without going very out of tune. Another method of tuning is Pythagorean tuning, or three-limit tuning, which derives all notes of the scale from 3/2 ratios. This makes all of the fifths in the scale very stable, except for the last one. Because powers of 3 can never be even, you can never create the perfect octave, so the last fifth of the scale will be very sharp. It also suffers from a similar problem as just intonation. It is difficult to change keys and still sound in tune.
The final method of intonation, and the one that is used most widely today, is equitemperant. Rather than worrying about complicated ratios, equitemperant divides the octave into 12 equal slices. The downside is the only interval that ever matches its perfect ratio is the octave, but all the others will be close enough to sound good. Equitemperant allows for fluid key changes without compromising intonation. The difference between equitemperant and relative tuning systems can be summed up by this analogy. Imagine you have a ruler that is 13 inches long and a marker that can be used to divide it into 12 different pieces. In just intonation systems, the first 11 segments are marked to be exactly 1 inch long, but the last segment will be too long. In equitemperant, 12 equal segments are made. Each are slightly longer than an inch, but all are approximately correct.
All of the musical physics we have discussed so far has been in the realm of pure tones, exact frequencies that can only be produced by a device. Voices and instruments actually make sound in a series of layered frequencies. Their relative strength to one another determines the perceived timbre of the sound. Overtones are several notes that sound at the same time. They follow the harmonic series, which is a series of frequencies that follows the pattern of an octave followed by a fifth, a fourth, a major third, a minor third, and so on. When you hear this, your brain interprets the pitch of the root note or the lowest note as the pitch sounding.
Alright, so now Tegan is going to play a single note, and I want you guys to see if you can hear these two notes, these overtones, further up. Alright, now play. The shape of the wave is another component to the sound we hear. While the frequency of the wave determines the pitch, the shape of the wave determines the timbre or character of the sound. That shape is determined by the strength of each overtone within the sound. A perfectly produced wave will be a sine wave and will produce the purest tone. However, most instruments will not produce a perfectly pure sound, and this shows in the waves produced. A wave closer to a sine wave will have a purer sound than a wave that deviates from it. A violin, for example, has a waveform that is closer to a sine wave due to the vibrations being produced in the metallic string, whereas the sound of a saxophone is produced in the wooden reed, which produces a different wave. As you can see, the waves of wind instruments differentiate more from the sine wave, while the violin produces waves closer to sine than wind instruments. Because sound travels in waves, when multiple sound waves are going in the same direction, they can combine to form a single resultant wave. This is called superposition. When the waves align to create a resultant wave with a greater amplitude, it is called constructive interference. When they are misaligned with each other and create a resultant wave with lower amplitude, this is called destructive interference. Destructive interference is the basic principle by which noise-canceling headphones work. By creating a sound wave 180 degrees out of sync with the noise around you, with the same frequency and amplitude, you can cancel out the sound. So, we covered a lot of miscellaneous musical concepts in this video. I hope you learned something about the physics of sound today, and that maybe you were able to make some sense of it all. Get it? Because cents are a measurement of how in tune notes are. I'll see myself out.
Hello everyone, hope you enjoyed our video. It's been a nice experience recording this and hope you paid attention for the duration of that. Yeah, and hope you learned some nice musical physics and all. We worked pretty hard on this, as you can see if I turn the camera this way. There we go. It's quite dark outside, so yeah, it's been quite a few hours from all of us working on this, so hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll leave you guys with some music. Have a nice day.